Good day everybody to this second classroom from Team Resolume. I hope you all tuned in. I hope I'm audible. Last time we had some issues with audio and video. I hope this time it's all fixed. This second classroom will be all about sources. I'll discuss how to work with stills, image sequences, audio, video, effects, and generative sources. We'll run by them, show some tricks. Some of this stuff will be really basic, so I'll try to get into some more advanced stuff as well. If you have any questions, my good friend and colleague Zoltan and Christoph are in the comments to help you out. Let's one more time check if I'm audible. It seems that I am audible, so let's get started. The first thing I want to start with today is talk a little bit about stills. So using images. Not too extensive on this. Resolume supports 4 formats for images. We have JPEGs. This is my, by the way, this is my great 3D modeling skill you see right here. This is just an image I rendered out of my 3D package as an example. And yeah, so in Resolume you can use JPEGs, you can use PNGs, you can use TIFFs. It's just whatever your promoter, for example, sends you. The advantage of PNGs being that it can have a transparent layer. TIFFs can also have a transparent layer, but they are much more intensive on your hardware. They're bigger files. So one thing I wanted to talk about with you is that images actually have a duration, and they can be set. Now you might think, why would an image have a duration? This is very useful when you, for example, have an effect. Let's say we're adding an add subtract effect over this, and we want to do this over a timeline. Well, this will just be its own timeline, right? It's be as fast or as slow as it be. But if we want to have a clip position, for example, we want to have it on the speed of the length of the clip, this is where duration comes in part. So if I now increase this to 5 seconds, for example, this clip will be 5 seconds long. This also comes into play when you're using the BPM. So if I'm syncing this to the BPM, you already can see this is speeding up. My BPM is set to 120. Let's say I want to have this over 4 beats. Let's have a little bit of music on the background. And now in 4 beats, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The timeline plays through. Do half time, whole time. This is an easy way for you to use images and make them audio reactive or make them work on a beat. Is the music audible? It should be. One thing, if your show is very heavy on images, you're really relying on stills and you're switching very quickly between them, this can eat up quite a bit of RAM. This is why it might be a good idea to convert an image into a video file by using Ali. That's something I wanted to demonstrate. So let's open up Ali. Resolume Ali is the tool you can use, a free tool you can use to convert videos, images, and image sequences to the DXV format. Let's take my JPEG render in here. So we convert it. You get all the usual settings. You can trim it. It will be you cannot make it any longer than a second. There's not really a reason why you would do that. If you want longer time, just make the play it back on a slower rate. All the quality stuff you have normally with with a render from Ali can be done as well. Music is very loud. Okay, I'll fix that. Thank you for noting. Let's get back to Ali. Yeah, we put it in the queue. We render it out. Open it in the folder. And here we have our JPEG render now as a video file. So you can see it's playing back really fast because it's just a second long. But this is an easy way to get your images into video. Another case for this is image sequences. Let's take a look at that as well. For those who don't know what image sequences is, this is actually an image sequence. This is what you would use in a, this is a way you can export from a 3D package. This is just a cube I made in Blender. I'm not a Blender god at all. So I'll show you how this works. So we have here the image sequence, and an image sequence consists out of every frame. This is a 50 frame long animation, so every frame here must be in the same folder and should have the same name with a number, so like I made it here. And instead of importing all these images separately, you would take the whole folder and drop it in Resolume like this. And now Resolume knows, okay, this is a sequence of images, and we can yeah, I'll answer your questions in a bit. And this is a way you can quickly again get image sequences into Resolume. It's not the best way though. Again, the best way would be to render it in Ali. So let's boot up Ali again. Let's open. And in this case, you also open just the whole folder of image sequences. That's a thing you have to. Whoops. You have to drag it into Ali, the folder. And now it's also, and you can convert and render it as just the same. So now we have our image sequence. Oh, that's the wrong image sequence. Excuse me. Image sequence, that's the one. Oh, it has a really weird thumbnail. Fix the thumbnail. So now it has the normal, now you have it as a video. It's just probably a quicker way to work, because image sequences, now my image sequence here is 50 images, but that's not an average. I would say a few hundred images would be more realistic for a real render. Thank you. Zoltan is already answering questions about the DXV. So yeah, we use the DXV format. It is you should use it because it's made, first off, it's made for Resolume, and secondly, it's hardware accelerated. So Resolume just works fastest with the DXV. So much for image sequences. I'm going really quick. Let's have a look at audio. It's just because there's just for a lot of these things, there's just one good way to do it, and just this video is really about best practice and the best way to tackle these kind of issues. I wanted to look into audio. Please let me know if the sound is too loud, the audio sound. As for audio, you should always use uncompressed audio. For this reason, Resolume, for example, doesn't support MP3 files because they're very heavily compressed. All these are some formats that are supported. So you have the IAF format, the FLAC format, and the WAV format. I hope it's not too loud. My own sound is just very low. It's recommended to use the in the Resolume manual. The WAV format is recommended, but you can use these other formats as well. If we take a look at BPM for audio. Yeah, Jeremy says if you have many large images, it'll start to take a role on your CPU and as well as your RAM, because your images, still images, will be loaded into your RAM memory, and if you have a lot of images, that will eat up RAM really quickly. So if you're switching between images very fast in a show, you should convert them to video instead. It will, and then it can probably run on your GPU. I'm not a coder. I don't know exactly how that works. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about BPM. Oh, also, if you preview audio track, you get this really nice equalizer here in the bottom. Talk about BPM syncing and how it works with an audio file. it's very simple. If you are set to timeline, the music will play back regular, ignoring the BPM. Here I'm doubling the BPM, nothing happens. If it's synced to the BPM, this music goes a lot faster. This could be a nice reggaeton beat. We go back to house, and now we got some really dark Earl Sweatshirt level rap music. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. If you have audio BPM synced and you change the BPM, the pitch of the music will repitch. We don't have elastic stretching of audio yet. Another cool feature to take a look at is the beat looper. This works with both video and audio, but it has to be a file. This doesn't work with sources. The beat looper is over here. If you don't see the beat looper, it might be invisible by default. It might be invisible by default. You can, under the view menu, you can find the beat looper over here. And beat looper will simply make you play a little bit DJ style, so you can get little repetitions. I feel like David Guetta. Yeah, so this, and if you have your audio and video files synced up, this can be a really cool way to build up both audio and video files at the same time. It's a cool little trick that I think not too many people know this actually exists in Resolume. One thing I made a video recently about is audio effects. So under the effects tab, you also have audio effects. There are some built-in effects, but you can also load in your own VSTs. I did a tutorial video on that a week or two ago, so you can check it out on YouTube later on how to get a VST effects, not instruments, VST effects into Resolume, and you can get all kinds of crazy effects. If I have this file on, let's say I want to have a low pass filter, just drag it in. It works just like that. Okay, let's talk about FFT, or a fast Fourier transform, as it is, I think it's called. There are three ways of FFT inside of Resolume, and I want to discuss all three of them and see what you can use it for. Basically, this is the easy and dirty and easy way to make audio reactive visuals. So here I have this little square going on. Oh, let's turn this other stuff off. Yeah. So we have this shape, and the scale of the shape I use clip FFT, which will take the audio of this clip and use it as its source for the FFT. If I turn the volume down, the FFT stops. So for those who have never seen this menu before, let's turn it back to basic. Clip FFT, you can decide whether it should play forward or backward. Well, that's not really working right now. So it responds backwards, forwards. This is if you want to have it to increment or decrement with each hit. So for now, let's do it forward. If you press the little button here, you get an equalizer. You can set which frequency range the effect should respond to. So in this case, when you boot it up, it responds to the entire spectrum, from low all the way over here to high all the way over here. So let's say we want to isolate the kick. We can go all the way here and try to get it in the kick. If the sound is not loud enough, you can increase the gain. Let's set it back. Or decrease the gain if it's too much. And the fall is simply how fast the tape head moves back after it's shut up. So if it's really short, it falls back faster. If it's set really high, and now you can see it won't even get back all the way. This is a quite finicky thing to fix. Quick and dirty buttons under here simply sets a range for you: low, mids, high. Most of the time I will use low and then tweak it myself as well further. Let's move on to composition FFT. So that's I actually have to drag this one down, or else it will not work. Here we have a little dot, and this one is set to composition FFT. So this is the sound of the entire composition. So if now the song is playing over here, for example, let's see. Oh, we have a little problem with this because the the audio is. Let's see. So even though this shaper does not have an audio clip on it, it will take the sound of whatever the composition is outputting itself. All right, I think that's pretty straightforward. Then we move on to the last one, which is really interesting. It's external FFT. So that's basically microphones that you could set up a microphone and connect it to your computer and use that as an external microphone. In this case, I'm touching the microphone now, and you can see it's responding to it. Most of the times, the way I've used this in a live setting is actually getting an audio signal from the sound guy into an external sound card that I have, and this will allow me to make audio responsive visuals. Like really easy way. You just create a few effects on your composition that are using external FFT. You set some ranges over here, and quite quickly you can get a really cool quick and dirty audio responsive visuals. If you go into your preferences and under audio, this is where you can set your external FFT input. Right now it's channel 1 for me on my Complete Audio 2 external audio card, because channel 1 is my microphone. I could plug in a drum machine or have just the output of a DJ, or I've used this as well more in an experimental context, having a contact mic on a drum kit, on a kick drum, and the drummer of the band I was VJing for, every time he would hit the kick, the visuals would explode. This is a little bit more out of the box thinking, but can be a really cool way to use FFT, external audio FFT in your shows. That's more like a band context or a DJ context. So I think that's it for audio. If you have any questions, let me know. Zoltan and Christoph are in the comments to help you, and I can also try to help you out. Let's move on to video. Most of the video stuff you probably know, so this is probably going to be a quite short bit. As far as audio formats, we have the .mov.movie format supported. We have the AVI format supported and the MP4 supported. But if you export something from ALI, it will be, I think it would be .mov. Let me check that for sure. I think you can also use Motion JPEG in ALI. Let's just give that a quick try. So let's go through the whole ALI process anyway, right? You have a video you want to convert. This stuff is already converted to DXV. I'll just grab a clip, have it here in ALI, can preview it. I can trim it down, make it a shorter clip, longer clip, whatever. I will convert it. Here I can set my settings. I can go to DXV. I thought maybe there was also, no, there's just a DXV format. Yeah, the DXV format. I thought maybe there was some Motion JPEG stuff in here as well, but that's something else. So the preset will be set to normal quality with no alpha. In this case, I would like to have Well, let's say I want to have a high quality with alpha. So for those who don't know, alpha is the transparency channel in your video. And I often get the question, why would you use high? What's the difference between high quality and normal quality? Well, when do you use high quality? High quality is something you should use when your video has a lot of gradients, so a lot of overlapping colors, slow gradients from color 1 into color 2. That's when you will see an improvement with using high quality. In this case, in this clip, there is not a lot of, there are no hard gradients. We can see here on the, I will pause it. This is really rough. If we look in the reds, it's really rough color transition. So exporting this at a high quality won't give you any benefits. If this was all gradients, like really smooth gradients, you could have a benefit with exporting in high quality. So yeah, alpha for transparency. You could resize it. Let's say you want to make it really small. Fit, fill, stretch. But yeah, of course this clip is already perfectly fitted for the format. You can even have a custom. Let's do something really weird. So, you can trim it. That's a new feature we have. We don't have for that long. It's quite new in Ali. So you can simply say, okay, I want my video only to be 8 seconds long. You can trim it here as well, and you can actually export a smaller part of the video if needed. Output, location, name, queue, render, done. Open it. And this now has a really weird, I think it's now 9020 by 480, so that's not a very, doesn't make sense from a VJ perspective, but I just wanted to show what you can do with Ali. So yeah, we talked about formats. Let's talk a short bit about transport. I think this is probably familiar territory for everybody. Here we have the transport bar. This is where our video goes. We have a start point. We can set the endpoints. You can do this by dragging and dropping. You can do this by setting a number. And these are just done in seconds. So if I want my video to be 6 seconds long, now it's 6 seconds long. Can play it forward, backward. We can adjust the speed really fast. And often you see me resetting values. You can do that by right-clicking a parameter. So in this case, I right-click this and it's set to default. Right-click that, set it back to default. Video can be paused. Remember that pausing a video is remembered. So if I now go to a different clip, for example this clip, and I go back to this one, it's still paused. Then we have the timeline. So you can either BPM sync it, use SEMT or Denon. This is stuff I will show off in the future, but for now timeline just runs the timeline of the length of the video. BPM sync will sync it to the BPM. So if I increase the BPM and then decrease the frames, it goes faster. Oh. Timeline. Here you can set how the video is played back. For this, to demonstrate this, I'll make the video quite a bit shorter. And let's say loop, so it will go from left to right or from right to left, depending on which way you. Now it will loop this way. Bounce will bounce the video up and down. I use this quite a bit. Random opens up a whole new section. Where you can say how big the jumps of the random jumps are going to be. So if I want really small, glitchy jumps, speed is still speed remains the speed of the timeline, and the interval is how many time there is between the jumps in randomness. So if this hit is really low, the video gets really twitchy. And what you can do is a little trick. You set the speed to 0 and the interval, or the speed to just about. And now you have the real little bit old school random way of playback. Play once and clear. Let's take a look at that as well. What is going on? Did I break the video? Oh, the speed is set to 0. Sorry. I was like, did I break something? I'm using a beta version of Resolume, so I was already afraid that I broke something. No, the speed was set to 0. Of course, if your speed is set to 0, your video doesn't work. Play once and clear will simply, as soon as your video starts, it should be playing. As soon as a video starts and it ends, it play once and then it turns itself off. So play once and go to nothing. And play once and hold will play the video once and then stop it until it's played again. Right? Thanks for nodding, Steve. Something to look into as well. Cue points. Cue points are preset positions in the clip where you can quickly jump to. I already made 2 cue points over here. This one is at the start. When I click it, it jumps back to the start. And this one is somewhere half in between. So if I click this, it jumps there. You can set a cue point if it's in this case these cue points are still empty. So if I press, for example, I want a cue point somewhere over here. Click. Now it's a cue point, and I can jump back to it anytime. What you can also do is pause the video, move it to a position like this, press the button over here, and now this is set as a cue point as well. To clear a cue point, right click, he says while it's not working. I had some delay. Huh. Weird. This is probably a beta thingy that's going on here. Normally you right click it, click the clip, and it will clear itself again. Yeah. Oh yeah, it works. Yeah, I was too hasty. So right click to clear. Cue points can be really cool for mashing video quickly together if you're really like bashing through a lot of content at a very high tempo. For example, I use cue points quite a bit when I was VJing with a band, and I had to my clips were firing at almost the same tempo as the drummer, for example. Then cue points come in really handy, and you can do some really cool almost remix style VJing with it as well. So that's something you should definitely try. Let's move on to effects. Of course, effects are not sources, but effects can be used as sources, shown here. Of course, we all know if we have a clip and we have an effect, we can just throw it in like this and use the effect. What you might not know is that you can use effects as clips. So in that case, you would throw it over here. I already put in the trails effect over here. And when I click it, it actually calls itself a video router. And it will say the input for this effect are all the layers below. Or you could say a specific layer. This way, if you have one effect that you're using for many clips, you can throw on, you could make an effect layer, for example, if that suits your workflow. You can almost see it if you're photoshopping normally as adjustment layers. You can stack them. So this effect now will apply also to the other clips I'm triggering over here. And if you want to get really creative and experimental with this, so you could route these layers into certain layers, and maybe there's a video router on that layer, and you can get really complex patchings in Resolume. But for now, that's not going into that. There are a few effects though that can be used as sources. We have the shaper, which is also used as a source, but yeah, you could also take it from the effects. The same with the solid color and strobe. So these are the effect versions of these effects. Grid is an effect that will generate will generate visuals if you just throw it in. And of course, really, really important, snow. Both the snow effects will generate video even if they are not thrown on a clip. And we have static if you ever need that. If you need to bluff that your projector is broken. Sorry, I can't work today. There's only static. Don't do that. So yeah, let's move on to the last tab, which is probably also going to be the biggest part of this classroom. That's going to be the generative sources. So these are the sources that are built into Resolume. You can find them under the Sources tab. There's quite a bit of them. We have presets for them as well. Let's start with the first one, and probably something that might be confusing. This is the blank source. It is exactly what it says. It is nothing. Why would you use it? Well, we have the autopilot function in Resolume. And if you would make an autopilot sequence of videos that are sequential, triggered after each other, but you want a pause in it, for example, that's something you could use the blank for. You could use it as an emergency quit button, just for yourself, and you could use it as a black background if needed. But yeah, that's probably all I have to tell about the blank source. If you have some cool uses for the blank source, I'm really curious. Let's move on to the second one. I think this is pretty much in order. We have the checkered effect. Again, very simple. It creates a checkerboard for you. You can create. You can set your own numbers, how many you want. Change colors where needed, etc., etc. That's about it about the effect. What I'm now trying to do, I didn't do it with the blank effect, but I'll show you sort of the basic functionality of each source and then something you can make with it. So in this case I made this little clip. This is made with the checkered source. So if we disable all my effects, this is basically how I started out, with just a black and white checkerboard, 4x4, and I put it into the cube tile effect, and this will create a nice rectangle for me that's just animated. I animated the rotation parameters on it, so it will rotate around a little bit. Next, I wanted to make it a little bit funky, so I add the goo effect. And recently I'm playing around a lot with the goo effect, and I really like it when the resolution is set very high. I think by default it's set quite high. It's a 32, so it would be way too chaotic for my taste. But if you set it at 4, I think 4 is the lowest resolution you can go. You can get a really subtle warping effect from it. You should definitely try the goo effect with a low resolution on like a gradient that is tiled. You can get almost fabric like, it looks like fake fabric simulation. It's a pretty cool feature. Then I used drop shadow to give it an edge, with the distance set to 0 and all the rest of the parameters cranked up, so I get an edge around the whole cube. Then I wanted to have some radial cloning, because more cubes is more better. And then finally I used the recolor effect to get this cool gradient glowing box thing. So just to show you what you can make, this is just a thing you could make. I'm curious what you guys are building with these effects. But yeah, that's the checkered effect. Gradient, I did a tutorial on this a while ago. Gradient will simply move from color 1 to color 2. You can switch between a smooth or a stepped output. And when you're doing stepped, you can say how much steps. So maybe I just want 3 steps or more. And we have different versions. You can do vertical, radial. You can create the size of the radius, and angular. You can rotate, and you can set. This is kind of cool. If you set it to, for example, 3, you can get these cool shapes out of it. And you can select between 2 colors or a palette. So if I would take a palette like this, make it smooth again, I think this is also a nice trick. It makes it more smooth if you put the first. This is just for when you use the angular type. Put the first color as last color as well. It makes the transition between those two smoother. Let's see, radial, for example. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the gradient. Again, I try to make something pretty with it. Let's dive into this gradient. I think I started out with the default gradient. Yep, just exactly when you draw it from the sources panel into your screen, into your composition, this is exactly the gradient you're getting. I made a sphere out of it using the sphere effect. This can be a bit of a tricky effect to work with, but yeah, I ended up with this tennis ball, sunny tennis ball, sunny golf ball visual that I put a quad mirror on because I needed more golf balls. Put it into a linear cloner. Yeah, tweaked a whole bunch of settings for it. And then I think I did exactly the same effect. Yeah, I just copied and pasted it. And so we have two versions of it, making this big star-shaped visuals. These are just quick sketches. You know, I can be stuck on these kind of things, these generative things, for hours and hours on end. And you just have to play around and tweak until you get something that you are satisfied with. Moving on to the Linescape. I always turn down the speed immediately. I think it's moving way too fast. The Linescape is a source that creates a Linescape. Slowly, the lines move in. You can tilt it. You can change the direction, so it almost feels like you're moving in 3D space. You can create a larger distance between yourself and the Linescape. And if you position it all the way up, now you can get a nice downward scape. The speed is simply how fast this thing moves. I like to use it at slow speed because this makes me dizzy. The height is better shown if I tilt it a little bit back, probably. The height is how high the lines are moving up. So you can create a complete flat surface or move it up. The jaggedness and I think also the wobble, they don't do anything if the height is set to 0. So let's move it a bit up. The jaggedness will make hard edges, so hard lines. And the wobble will modulate the height over time, so you can get more like a wavy effect. Attenuation is simply the depth of the effect. I probably pronounced that wrong. So you can get a really short field of view or a really deep one. That's all up to you. And you can adjust the depth of the lines, the fuzziness. So that's basically how blurred the lines are. And there's this show knots option that you can turn off, and it will create even more smoother lines. You can go from really hard to really soft, and of course you can change the color if you like. So I took this concept and I created this visual with it. Is it working? I think it is working. So let's turn the music off for a second. Let's go back all the way to the basics. So it's basically a Linescape with no fuzziness. I wanted thick lines, and I wanted to use use the Linescape as an audio visualizer. So I added the composition FFT as a trigger for the amount of jaggedness, but because I turned the volume down for the stream, now the effect didn't work. So let's fix that. Yeah, so now I always like using the Linescape for audio visualization. So that's working. And what I did is I shifted the RGB just a little bit. So these are really small to get this, it's called a chromatic aberration or something like that. So that the colors are a little bit shifted away from each other. Next I mirrored it. Already, you know, you're just 2 effects and you're in a completely different realm. That's what I really like about Resolume. 2 effects and you're different visual. So yeah, these are just mirrored on both the X and the Y axis. And apply the transform effect to make it just simply rotate it 45 degrees because that works nice with the mirror quad. And then I added the mirror quad on the mirror quad. And now we have our audio reactive lines that could be like the start of your of a composition or an effect. Yeah, I like it. Let's move on to the next one, which is the lines. These will just create lines for you. It has fuzziness, so you can go from soft to hard lines. You can create an amount of lines. Of course, you have to adjust the width. Get a whole bunch of lines. It can rotate. Oh, wrong button. And it has a position, which is just a translation of of the lines. And this is something you can animate, for example, to get moving lines. I often use this effect or this source as a starting point for masks. So that's what I did here. I created this mask. You can see in the preview screen how the mask looks. It's just the lines with a bit of fuzziness, 6 lines, and then I use the fragment effect to turn it into this pseudo 3D Linescape almost, and then combined with a gradient underneath it, it's a quick and dirty way to make some interesting masks. And you can go as much in depth with this stuff as you like. Any questions? No. So yeah, that's the lines effect. Moving on to the meta balls. I did quite a big explanation of this on a tutorial a while ago, but I wanted to show it anyway. So the meta balls are just balls floating in space. They are based on a grid system, so as soon as you increase the grid, I think you can go quite high. I think it's 20. And these balls will connect with each other once they get close. They have a average and a minimal blend mode, so you can get average. You get a more softer effect than the minimal. Size will set the size of the balls itself. The distance is the amount of distance it takes for them to connect. So if you increase it, it takes a long. They should be really close to before they can connect. And if you reduce this, they connect much easier. If you play with the size and the distance, they go hand in hand with each other. The radius is the movement pattern of the. So if I make this one really high and this one really low, this is how much the radius each individual ball rotates. So if you put this really low, increase the size a little bit, you can see that they are the balls are turning really slow. Slow circles. As you increase, they get closer. Fuzziness is also just it's a quick and easy way to create cloud-like structures. Speed is simply how fast they move, and you can offset them with X and Y, give them a color and a background color. What I did here in this example is I use my settings. I'm adjusting the between. I animated the size of the balls a little bit, so they grow and shrink over time. just modified some of the settings to get where I want it to be. So with all the effects off, it looks like this. I did a drop shadow and then another drop shadow, and this first drop shadow is angled at 45 degrees and the second one is minus 45 degrees, and this way with both of these effects on I almost get a big how you'd say a border around each individual shape. Next is edge detection, and after this I colorize it to get this really nice, almost bacteria-like visual, and then I combine it with the feedback source, which is the one below. So let's activate it as well. And what the feedback source simply does is take your output and stick it to your screen basically. So if I, instead of the meta balls, I would let's use this one instead. You can see the last frame is also glued to the screen, and these are also stuck to the screen now. If I take something else, let's take this for example, or the Linescape. You can see it moves. It sticks the visual to your screen. Now this one doesn't work because it's not transparent. But yeah, that's feedback. I think I did a video on that as well a while ago. You can check that out. Next, rings effect, pretty cool. A lot of parameters with this one. This is a very modular effect. I think this is the kind of stuff we're gonna see in the future as well with Resolume. This kind of stuff that has simply a lot of parameters to shift and change your shape as you see fit. You can make quite a lot of. This is one of those effects, one of these sources, and you just have to play around with and see what you can make with it. I'll get some Trivial Pursuit action over here. Just playing around with it a bit. It has multiple colors. Front color. So yeah, you can see I already get lost doing this kind of stuff. What I use this rings in this case for is I made a mask with it again. So in the bottom you can see the mask. I animated the rotation to get this sort of this mask thing going on, and then I have, with for example my previous metaballs composition or clip, I can get a pretty cool visual going on just using a mask and using the metaballs together in conjunction, and that's pretty cool. Yeah, still, every once in a while check what you guys are saying and telling me. The shaper effect is next. This is something I use a lot, like a lot. So let's dive in. It has a lot of parameters as well. Let's open everything up. So you start out with this simple shape. So in this case, it's a circle. This is a source with a lot of parameters, but it's very simple to operate. It has a size. You can have multiple kinds of shapes. Let's go for a cross. You can position it. Let's offset it a little bit. Rotate it, for example, 45 degrees. Get a plus sign, and then you can enter your second shape. In this case, it's set to a hexagon, but let's make it a circle. And then it has a combination function, which in this case is a subtract. So shape 2 gets subtracts shape 1. We can add it as well, in which in this case they combine. Intersect. So you only see the parts where the two shapes overlap. Create This is also a quick way, if you intersect with a circle, it's a quick and easy way to get rounded. So let's change this to a triangle, for example, and get a more rounded shapes. Back to the cross. So the circle. And the last one we have is the morph. And morph opens up another slider. Oh, subtract and intersect do that as well, by the way. And morph will simply morph between these two shapes. From one to be this. This is a very cool parameter to animate. And also if they are offset a little bit, let's offset each shape. Oh, that's nice. They will warp into one another. If you make the changes too extreme, they will actually go into disappear completely. So you have to have them a little bit, little close, and they can morph between these two shapes. Below we have noise. You can add some noise to your to the inside or to the outside. Let's put this on a timeline, by the way. So we are morphing between these two shapes. So yeah, you can add some noise on the inside or on the outside, and use either grain or hedge noise. Let's say we want some grain, and you can adjust the speed of the noise as well. Then we have the color. I'm actually gonna, for this example, disable the noise. The color, the inner color and the outer color. And something what I like to do a lot is set the outer color to white and set the inner color using the hue saturation and a brightness setting, set the alpha to 0. So now basically we have a transparent center, which is very useful if we have it, for example, on top of another visual. And then using, for example, stuff like radio cloners, etc., to create it into a visual. And with this example over here, I went a bit overboard with this effect, with the morphing, because I'm actually combining between 3 different shapes. This one is a bit complex. Using an envelope for the radius, because if you're using a rectangle and the rectangle actually has a radius. So what this basically does is at one point in the clip, it just increases the radius of the rectangle to the point that the rectangle actually becomes a circle. So this is how I hacked 3 shapes into one shape. I'm going to take a quick look at some questions. There's somebody asking about specific strobe effects. Well, we're getting to the strobe in a bit, and you can create custom strobes. That's not a problem. We'll get there in a few minutes. But I did want to take a look at the next shape, next source, which is the sine wave. Sine wave. Well, it's like this. It's a math thing for nerds. You can set the amount of waves you want. Have a line or have a fill in between the 2 lines. Have the width of the line, of course, it has set to be set to line. You can adjust the width of these lines. Again, we have the fuzziness, just the harshness of the lines. We can direct it horizontal, vertical. If we have it vertical and we switch, or in any case we switch mirror off, every line is going to move the same way. I'm going to have 1 for now. The frequency is the modulation, how much modulation is applied. Speed is the speed of the modulation. So you can get some pretty funky shapes going. and then use the modulator and mod depth to go even further into weird territory. And then there's also the mod speed and the amplitude. That's just amplitude I wanted. It's the height of the modulation. I want to have that really subtle, and we can position it up or down in our scene. So that's basically the sine wave, and I used it again to create a mask. I like a lot of these sources to create masks. We have made this mask. It's a double sine wave, and I just gave it a mirror quad to have a little bit more on the screen. Turn this on, and this on. You can get some pretty funky stuff going on with the sine waves. I think Zoltan or Christoph answered your question about the custom strobes. I wasn't what I thought you were gonna tell. So let's move on. Solid colors, does exactly what you think it does. It creates a solid color as a clip. Can be used for a variety of applications. Same with the static. This is something I don't touch that often. Few modes for the static. Moving on to the strobe, it has a frequency knob, so if you turn it really up, it flashes really fast. Fade makes the transition from between the two colors faster. And the second one can be that's something you can try as well, like setting the second color alpha to 0. This way you can use it as a sort of a revealer. You can use it like this. Text animator lets you put in a text, anything you want. Well, basic text editing stuff, using a font, styles, colors, sizes, alignment. So I'm gonna say center or right, or in this case it doesn't really matter. Spacing, so how close the letters are close to each other. So, and then we have our animation. You have to turn animation on. You can animate lines, everything, words or characters. Let's stick to characters for now. And if I turn the opacity down, for example, this is just me animating the opacity by hand. You can see it affects in order. So that was from the front to the back to the front. It animates like this, and of course I can just use a timeline to do this for me. Or even say random. In this case, random colors will change. And the delay can be set, let's say, I want 50 milliseconds. Or a very large number. And the same can be done for scale, for example. Okay, animate this as well. Well, let's not do that. But the delay is set for the entire animation sequence. So this is the delay between, in this case, characters. It could also be the delay between words or lines if we had any. Same for rotation. And you can make some pretty wonky text stuff with this. If you want to get more in detail, I think I made a tutorial about this one in more depth recently as well. Text block is just a more simple version of it that can include more text. So yeah, I don't want to spend any. Yeah, it's you can use text block, but you can't animate it. No sound? Yeah, there's sound. Somebody's saying there's no sound. I think there's sound. So that was actually all of the sources I wanted to talk about inside of Resolume. One final thing I wanted to show you before we are ending this classroom is that you can actually, for those who don't know it, you can add extra effects into Resolume. We have, if you go to our website and go to support and then effects, there is the juice bar, of course, and there's also other sources where you can get plugins. So you have extra sources, extra effects into Resolume. So I just wanted to demonstrate one. This one I downloaded from the juice bar. It's called the Liquid Soul. It's a sort of really cool fluid simulation. And it has a boing, so why wouldn't you want to have it? And you can adjust the gravity, for example. That's pretty dope. And the size of this liquid. And I expected this kind of effect, this kind of source to truly kill my GPU, but it's steady. And you can make it explode. Well, this is a lot of fun, but I don't want you guys to sit around and watch me play with this effect for too long. So I did try to make a little visual with it as well. I hope you can see and hear this. So I took this Liquid Soul patch. Liquid Soul patch, that sounds like you have a liquid like goatee. Oh no, that's like a soul patch. It's like a beard style, right? And I added an envelope to the boing. So the boing is going to be on every kick. A question about feedback generators. I will talk about that in a second for you. We'll discuss that. I animated this thing to explode every kick, and then I added a mirror quad. I use mirror quad a lot because it makes content really fast for you, and then the recolor effect to make this cool exploding wavy stuff. What do you think? I kind of like it. I love it. So we have a question about feedback generators and how they interact. Well, first let's create a feedback. Let's turn the music off for now. So the feedback, like I said, the feedback simply takes the output of your screen and sticks it to your screen. Oh, don't make it up. This doesn't work, of course. Can we put in this on top? Yeah. Let's take a Linescape. And turn that all off. Why is this red? Did I change? Because I made it red. Okay. So the way I tend to like to illustrate this is by animating, let's say, the brightness. And hopefully you can see what's going on. And let's bounce this. So what the feedback does, it takes your current screen and sort of holds it. So the current frame, it holds it, and then the frame can only be overwritten by the next frame. That's for example, that's why this frame, let's see, I'll try static, for example. No, that doesn't make sense. I'm just trying to find a good example quickly. So as you can see, as I move this, it stays stuck to the screen. But if the only reason why we are not seeing a completely white screen, if I would stick to my brightness 100%, and I will do this a few times, I would simply get a white screen really quickly. That's why you have to sort of, or you need to modulate the alpha, or you need to modulate the color. What some people do is actually reduce the opacity of the feedback. That's also a solution. But then it starts to function more like a delay. So without the feedback, it would look like this, and with the feedback, it's sort of a delay kind of effect you got going on. So that's something you could try. Yeah, and the thing is with the feedback, that's also why I'm struggling a bit to explain it, because it's an incredible experimental tool, and you have to use it. You have to experiment with it. There's not like I did a tutorial on it a while ago, and the first thing I said in that tutorial as well is there's no magic button for good feedback. It's very easy to mess up your entire screen and create your entire screen white. I would never use a feedback source in a live show that is not prepared. For example, there's a lot of effects I would throw on a clip when I feel like doing it, but I would not throw the feedback source into a show that's just like, oh, let's see what happens, because there's a pretty good chance that your entire screen goes to white. And something to note as well, if I turn the alpha channel off, then this feedback source is also not doing anything anymore, because it needs that alpha channel, because now the black simply overrides everything. So if you see if you look at it as from a stick to the screen perspective, the black now also, if the alpha is on, the black is actually transparent. But if I turn the alpha off, the black is actually black, and it simply overrides everything. So the feedback is on, but it's not working because the screen gets sort of cleaned by the lines of black that also go over it. If that makes any sense, I hope it does. So that was a little bit on feedback, and I think I'll wrap it up with that. I'm starting to ramble, so I hope you guys enjoyed this this classroom. There will be a new classroom in a month or so, and in that classroom we will discuss the various blend modes in Resolume. So we have a whole bunch of blend modes. We'll discuss what they do and how you can use them from I always try to talk a little bit about the technical side, but also from a practical side, how would you use it in your shows. So that will be the subject for the next classroom, and I hope to see you back in a month or so. So ciao.